My name is Justin Chenette, and I'm the state representative from the great state of Maine. How many people have been to Maine? Oh, there's actually a few people in the crowd. Wow, great. I can put you in my suitcase to take you home if you want. And from the great city of Saco, which is, I'll just have to make a shameless plug, it's a great city, you should visit it. This is my first time in the state of Ohio, and I'm loving every minute of it. It's a great state, as I'm sure some of you know, and every time I talk about Ohio, I have to put a hashtag swing state, because I'm sure some of you know I've been inundated with the political mail, especially in the last election cycle. Now, today's topic for Issue Day is youth culture, growing up in a modern age, which sounds like a 2020 special edition of, 60 Minutes or something. But it's an important topic discussion to have within ourselves, to see where we've been, where we're at right now, and where we're going in the future, not only as individuals, but collectively as a society. Now, there are some kids that know their entire lives that they want to be politicians and run for public office. You might know somebody that fits that description, somebody that clearly was birthed with a suit on. Okay, but that wasn't me. First, I wanted to be an astronaut, right? When I was in elementary school, my parents took me to the Kennedy Space Center when I lived in Florida and even put up a mural on my wall as if I was on the moon looking back at the Earth. Sort of out of this world. Then my dream died and transitioned into a deep appreciation for architecture. I just loved looking at different older buildings, Roman architecture in particular. It must have been all those medieval video games, but nonetheless, it was really sort of an off moment for me until I realized math was involved, which is not my strongest suit. So I was like, no, that's not going to work for me. Next, okay? So in high school, I delved headfirst into the field of TV reporting and hosting and loved every minute of it. I didn't think I would, but I started to try my hand out behind the scenes, in front of the camera, and I really did like it. At my high school, it was Thornton Academy, and it was very much like this school. A little bit bigger. We had about 1,400 kids, but it was an independent school, and we were able to have kind of a wide array of different extracurricular activities, including managing our own TV station. And now, this wasn't a TV station that just broadcasted internally. We actually broadcasted to about 10,000 people in the community. We were the public access station. So while we were learning, it was also being broadcast publicly. So some people were very like, oh gosh, Justin, you should get off the air. But that's okay. I sort of held true. But until one day, I really woke up with an itch. And this was not poison ivy. It was an itch to get more involved. Okay, it was beyond just sort of reporting the story, right? Telling other people's story, holding leaders accountable. I wanted to do something about it. I wanted something to do at the end of the day that was meaningful, that I could change someone's life for the better, change my community for the better. Thus, I'm standing in for you today as the youngest legislator in Maine and one of the youngest in the country at 21. But how do you get to that point? That point where you know exactly what you want to do for the rest of your life. Because that seems like a scary thought. The rest of your life. Oh gosh, I better make a good choice. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, Justin, I'm more concerned about getting through today, this week, or even not sleeping through your speech today, let alone 5 to 10 years from now. But you can't expect to get anywhere in life if you don't know where you're going. I would equate this to me pulling out of a driveway without a GPS. Not a good idea. It would be fair to say that not everybody in this room is 100% sure that they found their true calling in life. But that's okay. You don't necessarily have to know exactly what you're doing. That could be, again, a really scary thing to think about. Maybe one day you'll just wake up and know. But for others, it may take some experiential learning. Now, I don't have to tell you twice, we're in a very turbulent economy. The unemployment rate for individuals 18 to 29 is a staggering around 12%, which is higher than the national average. So more and more young people in particular are looking towards additional alternative solutions and educational interests to try to better themselves and make a living for themselves. Now, when I was still on the media track, I interned one summer over at our Fox affiliate in Portland, Maine. It was an opportunity for me not only to apply some of the skill sets I'd already acquired over the years, but also learn new ones. From updating web content management systems to working on new promotional campaigns, it was really a jack-of-all-trades sort of scenario. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention all of the supportive and hardworking staff I got to work with, because the minute I walked through the door, I felt more than just an intern. It was like an employee, part of the family, the working family. And not many places give credence to an intern coming in and implementing positive changes to further the organization, but Fox did. And what started as an internship turned into a part-time job as the assistant morning producer for their news program, a position they created for me. So you never know what opportunity may present itself when you do things like an internship. And not only that, I was able to take those experiences and the connections and the networking I was able to make there and apply it to future employment searches and future jobs, which is exactly what I did in the current role that I have as Vice President of Social Media for a local marketing company. Now, while many organizations and businesses require high school or college credit for internships, many do not. Interning, or at the very least job shadowing, is an opportunity unlike any other. It's an opportunity that you can really sort of gather not only to build your resume, but valuable experiences to figure out what your passion is in life, to test it out. Now is that time for experimentation. Now, applying this to the realm of politics, I even interned once for a congresswoman of the opposing party because the key was gaining new experiences that challenged me to think about things maybe just a little bit differently. I gained knowledge and experience in learning about constituent services and federal issues. Now, I could have simply just read about it in our classroom, which would have been great. I loved history, I loved the political science class, but getting that hands-on experience is so much more. You get to really delve into it. So, while the number one priority for many is the ability to take care of yourself financially in life, that's important, but it's also important to enjoy what you do. If you can't wake up each morning excited for the challenges and opportunities the day at your job, or in many cases for you, that college might bring, then something might be missing. There's an old adage that states, if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. That's not to say, though, that work won't be difficult or would require less dedication. It just means it will fulfill your passions. Your life would be much more filling if you do that, just like coffee ice cream. It's fulfilling for me. But passion is something you can't learn in a book. It is something you have to go out and do. It's something that you either have or you don't have, and it's all about trying to figure out what exactly that is. An internship creates an opening to test out something you might love doing. At the end of the 3 to 4 months that you're in the internship, you can decide whether or not it's right for you. This is something that only you can decide for yourself. Now, I know in every fiber of my being what makes me the most happy at the end of the day and what I'm most passionate about. And I use this as a launching pad to vigorously pursue all possible opportunities to turn my dreams into a reality. And no, that's not a Disney commercial, but I think it's important to note that yes, you can do that. You can chase your dreams. And again, while I might sound like a naive recent college grad talking, it's important to never stop dreaming. You can lay out a plan to take the necessary steps along the journey to create your future, how you deem it fit. The sky is really the limit as to how you mold your life to your liking. Many times, the only limitations we have on ourselves are the ones that we mentally put on ourselves. That little voice in the back of your head, no, you can't do it. And I'm like, yes, I can. No, you can't. And it keep going back and forth. I'm like, I'm going to put that down to rest now. Just saying, it's in there. And it's surprising to me how often that we tell ourselves that we can't, when in reality we can. We can ignite that light within ourselves to do that and release any of that negativity or self-doubt and start reclaiming our passion today. Woohoo! Now, in order to do this, so let's make it real, you are the one that has to take the initiative. No one can really do that for you. You can't expect anyone to do that besides yourself. Now, if I sat around and waited for opportunity to knock at my door, I wouldn't have gotten to where I am today at such a young age and be standing before you today speaking. Think of yourself, and try to follow me on this, think of yourself as the driver in the car of life on the highway of self-discovery. I'm going to repeat that because some of you are like, what are you talking about? You are the driver in the car of life on the highway, of self-discovery. Translation, no one can live your life besides you. Not your friends, not your family, or even your guidance counselor. Now, when I made the decision to run for public office, it was my decision alone. I didn't want to be influenced by anyone. But the same could be said for any path you choose. Sometimes taking a risk by following your heart leads to great opportunities. Now, it's not easy to take ownership over your life and the choices that you make. Most often, you will have to step out of your comfort zone in order to live in your truest light. Or, as Katy Perry might say, you just got to ignite the light and let it shine. Just own the night like the 4th of July, because baby, you're a firework. I agree, Katy Perry. Just saying, I love that song. We should have that playing in the background right now, doing a little dancing. Meanwhile, there'll be those around you that might be turned off from your steady climb to self-awareness and ultimately success. In Ching-Ning Chu's book, Do Less, Achieve More, it's a great title, Chu talks about the aspect that may be difficult for you to implement in your lives, as I know it was for me, but it was something that I really had to learn in high school and in college. It was dealing with the realization that it might be time for a new group to surround yourself with. Now, she writes, quote, "As you are climbing the ladder of success, you may find yourself naturally moving away from the old counterproductive companions and friends. As the cream separates from the milk, so your old friends who do not share your commitment to excellence and achievement can exhibit jealousy and envy as you walk out of their lives." End quote. I know that sounds so deep, right? Now, it's easy to think that the friends you have today, and some of you might be sitting next to you, so you're like, oh gosh, there we go again. They may come in and out of your life, but that's for a reason. It's a good reason. Each person that comes into your life has a particular lesson or lessons that we can take away from it. The same could be said for relationships. We are constantly learning about new things, about us individually, and about how we view ourselves in relation to others. In the same vein, we do outgrow people, and it's okay to accept that fact. As interests change and as you figure out what you want out of life, it's only natural to gravitate towards others with similar passions. Light attracts light. You want to surround yourself with individuals that constantly challenge yourself and be a better you and not keep you at a stagnant certain level. This was something I had to really discover as I embarked on a new chapter. Spending a year of my life campaigning for one position, for one outcome, on one day, can really make you realize who your true friends are, the ones that will stick by you through thick and thin, and also exhibit some very strong long-term planning skills with an end goal in mind. When I announced my candidacy, I got immediate pushback. I was 20 at the time and still a full-time student in college. The party higher-ups had discussions about putting their own candidate who they felt was more of a sure thing. While I was known in my city mainly due to my media presence on local access TV, I was relatively unknown to the political establishment. I wasn't part of the good old boy system that plagues government, as I stated earlier. I didn't seek anybody's approval before I announced my candidacy, not even from my own party. Luckily, I did have a few strong-willed advocates in my corner to back me up, including the sitting incumbent. But I think that's important to note. There are those individuals that are really the roots in your life, that really will hold true by you no matter what, even when it may not be helpful for them to do so. And you have to cherish those people. Bring them closer together. These aren't the friends that you might have that swing in the breeze. You know, when it's popular to go left, they'll go left, and when it's popular to go right, they'll go right, but will stick by you. And having that opposition, for me, it drove me, it pushed me, knowing that there were people in opposition, to do better, to go a little step further. All my life there have been those naysayers, and I'm sure you've had a few of those people, that no matter what you try and do, they will find something to try to tear you down. One of my not-so-hidden joys is to prove those naysayers wrong when I believe in something wholeheartedly. It would be easy when you're faced with opposition. Just turn around and go back, very similarly like my angry GPS. She just yells at me all the time. Turn around now, in a British accent. And it's easy to throw down and just give up, to stay with your security blanket. That, my friends, doesn't help you or anyone around you. Now, I think this quote from Glee's sharp-tongued Sue Sylvester really sums it up best. She says, quote, "It's not easy to break out of your comfort zone. People will tear you down, tell you shouldn't have bothered in the first place. But let me tell you something. There's not much difference between a stadium of cheering fans and an angry crowd screaming abuse at you. They're just making a lot of noise. How you take it is up to you. Convince yourself that they're cheering for you. If you do that, someday they will." End quote. And I just love that. I mean, I think that really speaks to the true nature of what it is. It's how you interpret that. You can choose to do something productive and constructive with that criticism, or you can turn around and be like, "Oh, okay, I'll just listen to it." No, you have so much strength in you to do something more than that. Now, there were times in my campaign that really challenged me, and there were probably times where I thought about, it might be easier if I just sort of didn't do this. I mean, this was sort of a tough thing. It was tough on multiple fronts: personally, professionally, academically, emotionally, spiritually, and I'll just keep going. Aside from my age, my personal life was also called into question, because it's easy to dehumanize people in politics, and I'm sure you've seen that being in Ohio, where you'll get, literature in the mail that it's just like, "Oh, I didn't know that person had that mysterious background." And so when my personal life was called into question in particularly a hate-filled way, it was extremely difficult. Some campaign signs were spray-painted with derogatory comments, including a large banner that was stolen from our drive-in that magically reappeared at the polls with hate speech on it. Police had to get involved, blah, blah, blah. And it became as most frequent as my trips back and forth between Vermont and Maine. So you see, I was at college at Lyndon State College in Vermont for TV reporting while campaigning back home in Maine. Each week I would spend about 3 to 4 days in school in Vermont and travel 3.5 hours across 2 state lines to come back and campaign the remainder of the week and the weekend in Maine. Since I was going for broadcast journalism, I had to flip a switch in my brain between holding leaders accountable and telling other people's stories through the lens of a camera to being a leader myself. We are taught as journalists to have a questionable and sometimes seemingly apprehensive view of government and our political leaders, and rightfully so. These individuals have to be the government watchdogs and make sure that people are doing their jobs appropriately, and I sort of had that instilled in me ever since I wanted to be a reporter. But while back at home, I had to deal with the media and the campaign to ensure my political message got out correctly. So it was an interesting dichotomy, not only switching between roles as a journalist and a politician, but between a student and a leader. I mean, it's really weird to be like a college student and then go back home and you're a public official, essentially. And that is hard to wrap your head around. It was an interesting tale of two characters. Somebody should get me a little golden man for that. Academy Award reference. All right. Just in case you were confused. For anyone young or old, campaigning and governing, for that matter, takes a lot of commitment and self-sacrifice. For a year of my life, I had to forego hanging out with friends on a regular basis, days that you just feel like, oh, I just want to watch Ellen this afternoon and not do anything. Can't happen because of the laundry list of tasks always needing tending to. Your personal life definitely takes a back seat to the campaign and is virtually non-existent. And when you have school, a part-time job, and multiple boards and organizations requiring your time on top of that, you don't get much sleep. So I say that not to discourage anybody interested in running for public office, but I think it's important to be real about the challenges, especially that young people face when entering into that idea about running for office. In my House district, there are over 9,000 people I represent. During the campaign, I needed to reach as many people as I could, both for a contested June primary election and for a hotly contested general election that November. In order to reach those voters, door-to-door campaigning was necessary. Armed with a voter list, clipboard, and palm cards, I sought to make the case why I was the best candidate in our community to fight for us in the state capitol. Sure, there were some people that would shut the door in my face, not answer the doors, they clearly see me standing there, or question my age before listening to what I have to say. But when you go to a door that has an unrelenting supporter, that is just so excited to see you and will do anything to help you get elected, that makes all of that hard work, that makes all of that rejection worthwhile. Just one, that's one, all it takes. or even simply a Facebook message of encouragement can be nice in those harder times. It empowers you to keep trudging forward. There were aspects of the campaign that you might not expect that I sort of had to throw myself into. Graphic design, for instance, for lawn signs, website creation, social media outreach, brochures, better known as palm cards, speech writing, media interviews for TV, print, and radio, attending community events, fundraising efforts in order to pay for everything, coordinating with local, state, and national party organizers, getting involved with local causes, volunteering, and lots of walking in warm, cold, and sometimes wet conditions. I had to go through a couple pairs of shoes. The list goes on, but it was really fascinating. Looking back on it, it was pretty neat to do all those things at once, but going through it could be a little stressful, especially for young candidates. And there are young candidates all across the country trying to make a difference, but for political veterans, it comes second nature to them. When the last week of the campaign rolled around before the big day, I just really wanted the whole thing to be over with, to be honest with you. At that point, Red Bulls, 5-hour energies, coffee, really anything with caffeine was my best friend. I saw one, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have it. It's a problem, it's an addiction. On Election Day, I stood at the polls for about 13 hours straight, having campaign volunteers bring me some sustenance because I don't want to pass out. That would not be a pretty sight. They had to bring me even some foot warmers and some hand warmers because in Maine, I don't know about here, but it can get pretty cold. Yesterday when I flew in, I was like, this is really warm. And the double Sarahs basically mentioned to me that, oh, this is freezing. I'm like, no, this is warm. We just had a wicked bad snowstorm, and it was pretty intense. So it can get pretty chilly. So standing out by the polls for 13 hours, you definitely need something to warm you up. And coffee, lots of coffee. And so coming from a small town and being that my district is literally just half of a city, candidates themselves usually calculate their own election results. The city clerk basically prints out these long receipts, okay? It would be similarly like when you go shopping at American Eagle on Black Friday, okay? These receipts are super long because you're just like, oh, 70% off, no way! I get excited on Black Friday. It's like my favorite time of the year. Each ward in the district has a breakdown of votes, okay? And so with a sheet of paper in my hand, I nervously wrote down each result as they came in. Now, when your opponent leaves after just 2 wards coming in, you know it's a pretty good sign. But I waited until every last vote was counted and the last result was posted, because you never know in politics what can happen. There could be like a huge infusion of votes, and you're like, where did that come from? They don't like me. But that's okay. So I stood there and just made sure that we had it. So in about 2 hours, we had all of the election results. Now, I ended up with about 60% of the vote, about 1,000 votes more than my opponent, which was pretty good. But of course, my first reaction after getting this result wasn't, to get a big cake or to jump up and down. It was to post it on Facebook, obviously, like this, okay? And that's sort of the culture, I'm using the key words, that we have today, right, in the modern age, is that I needed to tweet it, I needed to post it, I needed to make sure people knew about it. But it was definitely a highlight moment for me. It validated that this was what I needed to do at this time. Not necessarily forever, but at that juncture, that's what I needed to do. And that all that blood, sweat, and tears paid off. Now, once in office, there are definitely a different set of challenges to face. I remember the first day I walked into the state capitol, and one of the representatives had asked me, so, are you in kindergarten? And I'm like, okay, I know I have spiky hair, but that doesn't mean I'm in kindergarten. Come on, at least boost it up a little bit. But it sort of speaks to that nature that it's just, they're not used to having a lot of young people. But overall, I'm enjoying every single minute of the work I do because it feels really fulfilling. It's definitely a full-time, 7 days a week responsibility with part-time pay, but extremely fulfilling being a part of something much larger than myself individually. I feel kind of like a part of history in the making, really trying to make each day better than the last. And that's a good feeling to have at the end of the day. Change often comes very slowly, but it does come. And I know sometimes in government we kind of get a little apprehensive, especially in Washington in particular, but it happens at the state level as well, where you're sort of like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? We're paying these people to work, and they're just going home on vacation. It's like they're just going to check out today. But it's surprising to me to see how many people are so passionate on both sides of the aisle that they really do want to make a difference when you talk to them individually and work with them, even though some of the times the bureaucratic red tape can get in the way of trying to make a difference. And too often we hear in the media basically how Democrats and Republicans are just at each other's throats. They're constantly bickering, trying to score political points for the next election cycle. But since taking office, I've made bipartisanship a requirement in any bill or committee assignment or project that I work on. And that's been an interesting experience, because not every time everybody has that same philosophy. So it's really interesting to try to do that. The formation of our Legislative Youth Caucus is no different. During the past campaign, my age was constantly brought up as a negative to serving the greater good of my community. I decided to turn my youthfulness as a result into something productive, because I think we should own it. We should own being young. After having discussions with my Republican colleagues on day one, after I got the, you're in kindergarten comment, we decided to get those of the legislature who are under 30 years old together around one table. There are about 13 of us in that age bracket. While that may not sound like an extremely large number in comparison to the 151 members of the Maine House of Representatives or the 35 members of the state Senate, it is, given the fact that that demographic historically skews a lot more seasoned. Okay? Some have been skeptical, though, about a caucus comprised of young members of the legislature bridging the political divide and focusing on specific policy solutions on both sides that they can find common ground on. But I'm optimistic that at the very least an ongoing dialogue can take place outside of the typical political hardball environments. Our goal will be to support bills that move Maine forward by addressing some of the rising concerns, and I'm sure you've seen this in Ohio, about in here in Toledo, just driving downtown, whether young people can live, work, and play here. This could mean some education reform, structural tax changes, support for small businesses, etc. The sky is the limit to what we can discuss, debate, and champion as a driving force for positive solutions in the legislature as young people. Okay? While youth can be seen oftentimes as a detriment to the good old boy system, because we're not afraid to speak our mind, I find we are finding ways around that, around to have to play that proverbial political game by making our voices heard and not confining ourselves to preconceived notions about what it means to be a Democrat versus a Republican. I like to think of those as the foundation of our political philosophies rather than the ultimate standard bearer of truth. Now let's play a little game. Not really a game. We're just going to raise your hand. Raise your hand if you would consider yourself leaning towards being a Democrat. Okay. Even though it's in the dark, I think I can see you. Now, raise your hand if you're thinking you're leaning towards being a Republican. Oh, I'm so sorry. Not to zero you in and all your friends are looking around, oh, they're Republican? No. No, that's really interesting, though. And I think if you thought about, well, what does that mean for you? What does it mean for you to be a Democrat? Or what does it mean for you to think about being a Republican? What are your values? What do you believe in? Is it something that you heard your parents talk about? Is it something you heard on TV? Do you think Barack Obama's just cool? Like, what do you really... And you know what? That's a legitimate point. There were people in the past election cycle that would say, well, I really like his name. Or I love Hillary Clinton because she's a woman. Or I like this person because of this particular characteristic. But politics is much more than just that exterior, much more than just that superficial. It's something much deeper. The decisions that we make today will have a ripple effect on our futures. So it is vital that we collectively have a seat at the table in crafting these solutions. I am hopeful for what we can accomplish together through that particular bipartisan effort, no matter what is reported in the media or by political parties to the contrary. But you don't have to be part of the political establishment, if you will, or run for office for that matter, to be a part or a productive member of society, to do your part, to get involved. Most people think of leadership as a position and therefore don't see themselves as leaders. It's a quote from Stephen Covey. Each of you, each of us, collectively, are the future. We have to take up, and we will have to take up, the mantle for a world left to us by our parents' generation. which, if any of you have been watching the news or clicked on a story online or watched the Colbert Report or any of those things, you'll know what's been going on with our local and global community. Our parents are leaving us a world worse off than what our grandparents left them. We are the leaders of tomorrow, yes, but we can do something about the challenges that we face today. And one of the reasons I ran for office, I don't want to wait 20 or 30 years to get involved to only find out, oh, it's too late to change for your life, but you can change for your grandkids, or you can change for your kids. No, let's change how we deem it fit now, in our lives, right now. And talking to somebody who has a title, you don't have to have a title to make a difference. Ooh, that sounds nice. Look, little background music. I was hoping for Katy Perry, but I'll settle for the chimes. Now, I'm going to tell you a quick story that has stayed with me throughout my short time on this earth. As a host of a public affairs TV program, I mean, this is just so nice, in high school, you're like, I'll just listen to the chimes instead of Justin. I often interviewed guests with varying degrees of political philosophies. I interviewed local candidates for council, for instance, for mayor, our state representatives, and senators, the governor, and even congresspeople. This just wants me to put to sleep. Gosh, I'm going to have to do another cheer or something. Be prepared. But there was one interview that really stood out for me. And not because it was my favorite interview, but because of what happened afterwards, that forever made youth civic engagement a banner issue for me, not just because I was young. After the burning hot lights dimmed, which they were burning hot, cameras tilted down, the official interview was over, the fun began. The particular candidate and I clearly did not see eye to eye on a very, very divisive issue. It was probably health care reform or something like that, where it just really divides people. After we sort of agreed to disagree, we're not going to kind of find common ground there, she asked me a fairly common question that continues to come up, like I mentioned with the kindergarten comment. She asked, "How old are you?" Simple question. At the time, I was 17. So I said, "I'm 17. And her next statement really shocked me. She said, "Well, you're not 18 yet, so your voice doesn't matter." Oh, no, she did not. I wish the cameras were rolling in that one. I'd be like, oh, that ain't gonna fly. But it really, just think about that for a minute. Your voice does not matter, because she couldn't collect your vote for her own political aspirations. And from that point on, I think that was probably that turning point for me where I decided I may have to get more involved than just be a reporter. Because with statements like that, we have to have leaders that say something back. We have to have leaders that say, you know, this is unacceptable. Young people have to have a seat at the table. We will not be shut up and shoved off to the corner. We are the leaders of tomorrow, and we are not going anywhere. Just say, not to break the podium. But it really ticked me off. I'm like, no, I have to have a voice, because when you turn that magic number of 18, you're not given a manual for life. You don't know exactly maybe what it means to be, like we mentioned earlier, what it means to be a Democrat or Republican. And oftentimes when you turn 18, some of you might not even register to vote. And I know my fellow peers where when they turned 18, they're like, what did you do, Justin? Literally, the first time, my birthday on April 23rd, on my 18th birthday, I totally was like, I'm going down to the city clerk's office and registering to vote. That was like my proudest day when I turned 18. Other people would do other things. But for me, it was really that opportunity to be a part of my country in a way that I wasn't previously. That I could have a voice through my vote. And according to Rock the Vote, there were an estimated 44 million young people between the ages of 18 and 25 that were eligible to vote during the 2008 presidential election. That number represents about a fifth of the total voting populace. Courting young voters is becoming ever more important because elections could be determined based on the demographic that turns out to vote. For example, During the 2006 midterm elections, there were two races for Senate in particular that were close, that the increases in voter turnout in the youth actually did sway the election in one direction. Does anybody like One Direction? Just had to insert that. I saw that. I was like, oh, I gotta talk about my favorite band. Don't you know you're beautiful? Okay. It fits with the theme, youth culture, right? Okay. In Montana, Tester beat Burns by 3,500 votes in a year that the youth vote actually increased by 39,000. 39,000 more young people voted in that election. In Virginia, Webb defeated Allen by over 9,000 votes, while the youth vote turnout increased by over 100,000 votes. 100,000 more young people registered during that election. Now, so with more and more young people getting involved, you would think that that would mean that our society is becoming more democratic. Well, a sad truth is reality competition television programming like that of the juggernaut American Idol, though the ratings have been dipping with Nicki Minaj, so I don't know about that, it's going to last much longer. But that may actually be partly responsible and not necessarily in a positive way to being more democratic. In 2006, more people voted in that year's American Idol season than the entire vote totals for President Bush 2 years prior in 2004 and even Ronald Reagan in the 80s. That vote total was 63 million. But just because people are voting and fulfilling their civic duty doesn't necessarily mean everybody knows exactly what they're voting for. Ethan Leb of the Washington Post reported, quote, 35% of the show's voters believe that casting a vote for a contestant on this juggernaut of a television program counts more than or as much as voting in a presidential election. More. 35%. I mean, think about that. Making sure Carrie Underwood has a CD is more important than the public policy decisions of this country? Think about that. And while that doesn't represent everybody, I understand that, it speaks to a larger issue in our society about priorities. When media outlets spend more time and attention on Lindsay Lohan, God love her, than they do with substantive investigative discussions on governmental policy, we can infer that there are major societal problems. And it's going to take our generation to figure out how to fix that very quickly. When you hear the word politics, what do you think comes to mind? Images of campaigns might come to mind. Those dreaded political ads on TV, I approve this message. Or a constant barrage of postcards spamming your mailbox every day. You may think that the president or our nation's capital, you may think of Democrat versus Republican, you may think of blue, red, donkey, elephant. And honestly, while those are associated with the word politics, they are more abstract in nature. It is easy to feel disconnected, and we hear this a lot of times about young people. Oh, the young people are so disconnected and apathetic. And it's easy when you talk about politics in those ways, right? Because it's like, well, how does that relate to my life? Right here, at this school, for instance. How does that relate to me? Not much. But if you think of politics in everyday things, I think the conversation shifts. Think about this statement. Politics has a role in everything in our lives. I'm going to say that again. Think about this statement. Politics has a role in everything we do in our lives. Everything. Now, right off the bat, you're like, no way, Jose. Politics doesn't affect sleeping, for instance. Besides, of course, the regulations for that mattress you're resting on, or maybe, the bed, when you go to bed based on daylight savings time, or take eating. Surely politics doesn't affect me eating that cheeseburger at lunch today. Nope. Besides, of course, the Food and Drug Administration's oversight of pesticides used on the farm, to the cleanliness of the processing facility, to the labeling of the foodstuffs in the grocery store. It all comes back to some form of public policy. That is why politics is so important. It affects us whether we think about it on a day-to-day basis or not. This is precisely why civics education at the high school level is so critically important. Imagine for a minute that our country was filled with people who went their entire lives without knowing how their government operated. During each election cycle, voters made up their minds based upon 30-second sound bites on TV, promising grandiose ideas and mudslinging their opponents. High school students learn about history, but not about the basics, like how to register to vote, for example. The problem is, you really don't have to imagine that. It's already a sad reality. I graduated high school in 2009, so not too long ago, from Thornton, and I didn't have any civics requirement. And in Maine, at that time, we didn't have a civics education requirement. I did, however, take a political science course due to my high level of interest in the subject matter as a senior. It was not mandatory for students to take, and as a result, only about 40 students out of a class of about approximately 350, this was a class, not the entire school, that meant 300 plus young people were going out into the real world without a solid foundation in how a bill was passed, or more importantly, how politics can affect their everyday lives. These 300 plus graduating seniors would go on to represent the majority of Americans that feel a similar disinterest and disconnect in our political system and with government functions. When us young folks turn that magic number of 18 to become legal voting citizens, again, there isn't a manual for life. How is one supposed to automatically know about government and the political process and to register to vote without that proper education? Now, I knew at this point that civics education needed to be a top priority for the sanctity of our surviving democracy. It wasn't about Democrats or Republicans at that point. It was about doing what was right for the future generation, our generation. And it just so happened I had been appointed to serve on the State Board of Education by then-Governor John Baldacci. Keep in mind, this was the first time a high school student, I was a junior at the time, much like yourselves, was appointed by the governor in a membership role on the State Board of Education. Being the first one, I felt a little nervous, I felt like it was a way for me to pave the way for future student leaders to make a difference. Here was the opening, I thought. Here was the opening, the opportunity to let the flow of information trickle to the people with the power to make a difference. But alas, the political realities and the political beings at work fought to keep status quo over creating the kind of positive change students needed. My role as a student member on the board seemed like it was intended to just be a photo op, because we didn't have a right to vote, just our voice. But using my voice in a strong way, because I didn't have the right to vote, was really important to me. And being very outspoken, got in trouble oftentimes, because I wasn't going to let the system let down our students, let down us. So there were often times where I'd almost get kicked off the board. As the first student, that wouldn't have been good. But I think it is important, and this is the lesson to take away from that, it is important to have the courage of your convictions, to stand up for what is right over what is easy, even when it may not be good for you to do so. You know, when I was faced with the opportunity to stay on the board and go with the flow, to sit there and twiddle my thumbs, or speak out, I made a choice. I made a choice to use my voice for the common good. I didn't want to sit there and not do my job. And I think you can apply that to a lot of different areas. Now, as a high school student, I was relatively a blank canvas, basically going into that experience and that opportunity. But I left feeling that our governmental system was ignoring young people and that political posturing was trumping actual positive change from taking place. And unbeknownst to me, I decided to run for office just a few years later under that same theme of changing how we do business. It came full circle. You see, it's really interesting how strange things work out that way. By year 2020, millennials, as they call us, under the age of 30, will make up about 38% of the voting population. 38%. That's a number they can't refuse to look at. That's a number that they can't ignore because that affects their political aspirations. So that's something that we have to keep in mind, that we do have the power not only of our voice to get involved, but at the ballot box to make a difference when you do turn 18, maybe some of you are. So I say that because it's important for us to collectively understand our role in the local, state, and national, global scale. It's so important. It has a ripple effect. And even this school's mission includes citizenship, to service others, responsibility to the world of many cultures, concern for Earth's resources, leadership, and teamwork. That's critical. You're already learning these things now. So you're already a step ahead of the game. Now, there are a few examples in my life that I've really witnessed where youth involvement was a centerpiece. When I attended the National Convention, the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina, the barbecue was great. Coming from Maine, we don't get that very often, and so it was just divine. So at the Democratic National Convention, we had a youth caucus there. And we assembled individuals from all across the country that truly believe that young people can make a difference. And having a room filled with about probably 400 to 500 young people, young leaders, just like yourselves, that are passionate about creating change, was such an exhilarating experience. I felt energized that, yes, I can make a difference collectively with this group. We're going to be able to do something about the challenges that we face. I also saw this at Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership at their World Leadership Congress back in 2007. We assembled ambassadors from all across the world. These were sophomores in high school that believed that community service was a critical piece to civic engagement. When we had to do about 100 hours of community service during this leadership workshop. But I got to meet people from Taiwan, Hong Kong, Germany, Mexico, Africa, a lot of different places, and they all had a common thread. It really taught me that while on the surface we may seem different, we have such a common purpose. We believe in so many common things. But oftentimes you see on a much global scale that our differences are sort of blown up, quite literally. And on a smaller scale, we don't necessarily recognize that we are all human at the end of the day. And I think that's important to point out when we're dealing with public policy, when we're getting involved in different organizations here at school, that we believe in very similar things if we just put down that barricade, put down that wall that's easy to put up, and let people in and have that honest to good conversation. And I see that in you, even in the blank stares, maybe a little glossed over, but when you go out to the breakout sessions, I know you'll have a good time. But I see that. Just in your ability to come to this school in particular, you are already a step ahead of other individuals because you believe in something. You believe in bettering yourself as it is in relation to others around you in a community. And I think it's important for you as the takeaway message, right, to understand that I believe in you, your teachers believe in you, your parents believe in you, and society should and will believe in you if they don't already. We want you to succeed. We want us to succeed. And we have to do something about that today. We just can't go home later this afternoon and not do anything. We have to start today. Because it's easy to put it off. Well, I'm tired. I don't want to do it today. I want to watch Ellen. I want to see a Zac Efron movie. But at some point, we have to say, you know what, today is my day. Today is the day to get involved. Today is the day to let your truest light shine. Today is the day to reach out to a friend in need. Today is the day to volunteer at a soup kitchen. Today is that day to make a difference. Now, you should know by now I love quotes. I'm going to leave you one last one, I promise. Nothing that I can do will change the structure of the universe. But maybe, by raising my voice, I can help the greatest of all causes, goodwill among men and women, and peace on earth. And that was from Albert Einstein. So whether you volunteer, or you intern, or you work on a campaign, or even, I would love to see you even run for office, believe that yes, you can do it. Yes, you have that ability in yourself to become aware and get involved. Okay, so now that my stump speech is over, I'd like to thank Sarah Nathan, and the other Sarah too. I just love that double Sarah mentality. It's really fun. And Maumee Valley. I'm really trying to pronounce it correctly, so if I do mess it up, you can just nudge me later. And the rest of the Issue Day organizing group, this is fantastic. These are the kinds of things that we need because it brings us all together and recognizes something that we may not see otherwise. It takes a step out of that daily hustle and bustle and makes us think. And I love that idea. So I look forward to seeing some of you out in the breakout sessions. I'm going to be doing one on basically personal branding. I know it says youth and politics, which I'd be happy to answer questions about. But somebody got it wrong. No. It's okay. I love typos. No. So you'd be happy to come to one of my sessions, but there's a lot of great breakout sessions today. I'm really looking forward to at least seeing one of them. So it's okay and understandable if you don't want to go to mine, because some of the other experts have some really great information that I hope you absorb, like SpongeBob. Okay? So with that, I'm Representative Justin Chenette. I approve this message. Have a great day, everybody.